Your precious time today. So I've titled this paper, or this presentation, Healthy, Wealthy and Wise, and asking if the university is this really important place to do all these three things. Can we do all these three things, or are there unavoidable trade-offs in it? So I was asked to give a talk on the commercial determinants of health by Caroline Mahan, and she's a terrible taskmaster because she sent me loads of material to read about Healthy Campus before I was allowed to come up here and present. Oh my God. So one of the things she asked me to look at was the keynote, or a keynote from last year by Mark Dooley, who said, quoting, I think, the former President of Ireland, that universities are a part of and apart from society. And this idea of we are both inside and outside society is really important. This really important position that we have to critique society, to question structures, to have experiments in radically different ways of living, thinking, being together. And often, and I don't know if you find this, often when I'm at a talk, or when I'm at a conference, or when I'm talking to people who are not in the university, they're always either explicitly or implicitly saying to me, be bold, push more, make things better for us, because if you can't do it within the university setting, there is very little hope anywhere else in any part of society where we can truly push boundaries and be transformative. So you guys know this far better than I do. Sorry, I probably should say I'm Norah Campbell. I'm an associate professor in the Business School of Trinity College in Dublin, and my area is on health-harming industries. In particular, the alcohol industry, tobacco, ultra-processed food and fossil fuel, but there are a lot more, and I teach on a lot more. The ones that are more kind of grey spaces, like the pharmaceutical industry, the management consultancy industry, the gambling industry, that kind of thing. I suppose the position that I come from is that I know a lot about commercial activity, and only very recently in 2018, I know that isn't recently, did I fall into this area of the commercial determinants of health, and I explain really quickly what it is. So I only came across this model in 2018. You will know it really, really well, and I suppose it's this visualization of the social determinants of health. The idea here being that, we have certain control over our immediate environments and we have agency over it, but increasingly the recognition is that it's the larger, more distal structural environments that have a greater impact on our health, and we have really little control over them. So the field of the commercial determinants of health comes from this area here. This socio-economic, and in particular economic. So it was basically this slow and dawning realization that the economic in this space is kind of a bit of a black box. So we can talk about a lot of social determinants of health, but we don't really know what is happening in commercial activities across certain industries and how it impacts health. So I suppose from about 2018 on, there has been loads and loads of work on this, and in particular synthesized into a Lancet series of papers in 2023. Now, I deliberated showing this model because I know when you see it, you'll get a fright, or certainly my students get a fright when they see it, because they go, oh God, is she going to now start explaining this entire model to me? I'm not, but I really do want you to see it, and I want you to think, if you are interested in commercial activity, to try and give this Lancet paper a look. I think it's a really good one. Stop shop. So basically it follows that model of social determinants of health, but it's focused on commercial activity. And basically the argument here is that commercial activity is often really involved in exposing us to health harms, planetary harms in ways that we don't immediately see. In this image here, you will see that, you know, in the centre you have ale health and health inequities. When we look at the very kind of top system, we live in a country, as many people in many countries of the world live in, where we have a political and economic system that is increasingly influenced by commercial actors and commercial activity. And the commercial sector is very involved in both of these areas. That means it shapes and drives and influences regulatory approaches to health, environment, transportation, etc. And these affect sectoral public policies. To give you really obvious examples, transportation is about car ownership, agriculture is about agribusiness, education is about developing human capital. And this doesn't happen overnight. Of course it doesn't. This is a kind of 40-year water dripping on stone that has led us to the situation that we're in now. So the commercial sector is this one here up on the left-hand side. And basically the commercial determinants of health says, do you know that when you look at specific commercial activities, there are ones that you will be really familiar with. So marketing practices being the one that everyone is very familiar with. So we know that about advertising junk food. Safe Food has a really good piece of longitudinal research in the last month showing that kids and young people are exposed to about 9 junk food ads online every minute. So we know about packaging, we know about things like shelf space and share bags, etc. for junk food. But really what the commercial terms of health is saying is that marketing is the top or the visible tip of the iceberg. There are all of these other types of practices that are happening that reduce the price of health-harming commodities, that increase exposure to them, make them desirable, make them benign through all sorts of activities. And the one that I want to talk today is scientific practices, because scientific practices encompasses commercial influence in the higher education sector and how that contributes to health harm. I suppose the historical example I want to give you as a really quick context is, of course, big evil tobacco industry. There's a great book by a guy called Robert Proctor called The Golden Holocaust. It's the best book I've ever read in the commercial determinants of health. And he has an entire kind of section in the book on how the transnational tobacco companies infiltrated the universities from the 1950s onwards. By recruiting experts, by making donations to prestigious medical schools, by increasingly creating institutional partners, so not just ad hoc funding, but collaborative kind of research institutes that led to what Proctor calls red herring research, distraction research, friendly or industry-friendly research. So this is much more than probably what you know about manufacturing doubt. It is much more about how can you create, how can the tobacco industry frame the problem in a way that makes it open to scientific uncertainty. So specifically what the tobacco industry did was it created what was known as distraction research. So really, really good, very scholarly research on the role of hereditary in cancer, the role of infection or viruses in cancer, all sorts of links between cancer, lung cancer and different vectors, but never about tobacco and cancer. And so it was a very elaborate program of asking the wrong question again and again and producing really good research, but also producing what's known as positive benefits research. So positive benefits research is focusing on, you know, tobacco and nicotine is really bad, etc., but actually it's really good for example, pilots, because it increases their concentration. And we've done this whole big program on kind of how using tobacco products can increase concentration, etc. So the manufacture of this distraction research allowed the tobacco industry to frame the research agenda systematically and for decades in universities. But it was much more than research and funding. The tobacco industry were on campuses everywhere. The tobacco industry, not in Ireland, thank goodness, but is very much one of the places where a lot of university pensions are invested. It recruited a lot from universities, and what it did was the University Tobacco Alliance lent credibility and legitimacy and the norm of being a legitimate actor by its collaboration with universities. So obviously when we look back in time, we say, well, that would never happen again. Of course, this is so obvious, and like it's almost embarrassing to speak so obviously about kind of academic capture. But of course this happens again and again. Maybe the one that you will be most familiar with is the opioid industry and its academic capture in the United States. And of course, I suppose what I say to my students all the time is that the commercial sector controls education and scientific practices in specific ways in specific countries. So it's really the examples I'm giving you now of the opioid industry or the fossil fuel industry or the tobacco industry. I'm showing you them because they're the ones that are most known, and they're really American. And in fact, you know, you can look at these and say, well, that doesn't really affect us here in Ireland. And it doesn't, and not to the extent that it does in North America, for example. So the examples that I want to give you today are from Ireland, and they are trying to inflect or put the Irish context in here. So what I want to maybe do is give you a few examples, and Caroline, you might give me a 5-minute warning. So WHO estimate what? Oh, Rose, okay. I thought you said you were a good cop. Okay. It's Tim that's bad cop, apparently. That's what he told me. Anyway, the WHO estimate that there are 4 corporate products that kill about between 1/3 and 2/3 of the, or are contributable to between 1/3 and 2/3 of global mortality every year, about 7,500 deaths per day in the EU region. So what are they? Yes. Yes, sugar, ultra-processed food, or unhealthy diet. Smoking, yeah. Cars, yes, exactly. So otherwise known as the fossil fuel industry. And these are, these manifest in really specific ways in the universities and higher education institutions in Ireland. And those are the ones that I want to talk about. So as Philip said, a lot of what happens in the university doesn't happen on campus. But it really strongly affects the students and the staff that are there. So the Healthy Campus movement is all the time struggling to kind of decide what its boundary is, you know, and say to internalize certain problems and externalize others because you can't do absolutely everything. I think, you know, we struggle to think of where is the fossil fuel industry in universities. It's everywhere in Irish universities, but Ryanair, for example, its entire marketing to young people is structured around the student experience. So mid-week flights, really cheap pricing, a lot of its framing is around, and its digital targeting is around campus holidays and things like that. So what I want to do is to tell you 4 strategies, 4 commercial strategies of the education and scientific activity using one of these industries each in Ireland. So the first one is pedagogy, and I call this alco-pedagogy. We know that the tobacco industry, from tobacco industry documents, was heavily involved in writing curricula at university level and directing curricula. and it did so for decades. We know that maybe the famous example that we know, or many of you know, is that DrinkAware, which is a front group for the alcohol industry in Ireland, funded an education programme for the junior certificate curriculum, SPHE curriculum, and a global review of youth curricula that is funded by the alcohol industry shows that it foregrounds individual factors like poor choices or peer pressure as routes to drinking, and backgrounds other pressures such as the role of the industry itself, its marketing, its new product development, etc. We know that when you look at the role of the alcohol industry in funding scholarships at everywhere from NCID to TU Dublin, we can see that it is still really involved. I want to spend a little minute talking maybe about the most particular one that's specific to Ireland, and that's the meat and dairy industry. It's particularly university or higher education sector is specifically interlinked with the generation of safe research for the dairy and meat industries. Since 2011, and the lifting of the dairy cap, or the herd was lifted by the European Union, there has been an explosion in agricultural emissions. So what the research that is being produced in Ireland around meat and dairy is about technological solutions and per hectare efficiencies rather than reducing overall production. I would be totally fine with that because I do eat meat and I don't particularly have a big problem with that if it wasn't for the fact that we are in dire straits when it comes to our self-sufficiency. So 82% of the food that Ireland produces is meat and dairy, 82% of it, and 90% of that meat and dairy is exported. So we are left in a situation where 2% of the food that we grow in Ireland, the farmers grow in Ireland, is horticulture, it's meat, or it's fruit and veg. So we are complicit in producing a really brittle system. There is a structural dominance of the food industry in campus infrastructures and the rise of facilities management. Facilities management is characterised by really low pay, really bad contracts, non-existent pensions, etc. I'm going to fly through the rest because I know I've got about 3 minutes. We know that the fossil fuel industry, for example, is really heavily involved in the university sector, particularly through the cement industry and the aviation industry. So there's no such thing as the fossil fuel industry, or it's fossil fuel intensive sectors that determine what the research question is. This is known as the science for profit model, and this is a really good reading of it. But when we look at the research, we can see that funding is used to maximise favourable science and minimise unfavourable science, but in particular, not just to create doubt or controversy, but to offer solutions that are favourable to the legitimacy of the industry in the first place. So I'm going to finish by saying that the Lancet called the commercial terms of health an example of a pathological system. The World Inequality Index shows that public wealth is dwindling and private wealth is growing. This is, I suppose, the most important graph that you will see in the 21st century, and it's repeated again and again in microcosms in place-based settings, for example, in university settings. So this is just from Trinity College. I'm on the finance committee of Trinity College, and we can see that the government support of universities has gone down, and when it has increased, it's with no increasing funding to reflect increasing numbers of students. I'm also on the executive committee of IFUT, which is the University Federation for University Teachers. In 2023, research was published by IFUT that showed that 1/3 of academic staff is in a precarious situation with their contract. So it has a massive impact on mental health. It has a massive impact on our ability to cope. So I'm going to say two things to finish up, and the first is this. I work in a business school. I am extremely pro-business. I mean, I've been there for the last 17 years. So the big message that I want to say is that there are many types of organisational designs that offer business value, and the one that is our default one in Ireland is the multinational or the transnational for-profit company. There are so many other organisational designs of business that deliver extreme value for the people who work there and services for this country, including cooperatives, mutuals, trusts, and much more newer versions of organisation. If we don't think about the commercial sector, we risk, I suppose, obfuscating or obscuring the role that they have in health. And so I suppose if I could leave with a certain number of recommendations, it would be these. This is what we've learned so far. I'm really lucky to be involved in Healthy Trinity in Trinity College, the college that I'm in. We've set up a commercial determinants, Healthy Trinity has set up a commercial determinants of health lab. And what we've learned is that sometimes we are so focused on, we don't have enough solutions or there's an implementation problem. But for me, actually, we don't have the right questions. So we haven't really understood that we need to be able to ask difficult questions and not to think of having the responsibility to have those answers straight away, but we have to be able to host and facilitate the difficult conversations that Philip was talking about, this idea of bringing non-obvious actors together. So when you look at government, for example, the Irish government, and you look at something like alcohol, you can see absolute policy incoherence. Department of Health has a particular position on alcohol. Department of Enterprise has a completely different position of alcohol. So has tourism, so has foreign affairs. So these are all not just talking past each other, but are in contest with each other. And obviously, at government level, a lot of that has to be glossed over and managed. At the university level, that should be celebrated. This kind of contestation should be something that it's our obligation to open up and to talk about in evidence-based, conceptually rigorous ways, and not say yes, we have the answer. We don't have the answer, but we have the question. I think we need to develop a more sophisticated understanding on conflicts of interest. And we have to understand this difference between additive thought and subtractive thought. So additive thought is saying, here's another initiative, here's another program, here's another thing that we can do. And subtractive thought is asking, what are we going to do less of in order to facilitate these things that Philip's been talking about of kind of community. We can't do community quickly. We can't do support quickly. But we need to be able to say, what are we going to do less of in the university in order to do these things that we're going to do more of? And then maybe the last thing that I'm going to say is that when we are vague in our pronouncements around sustainability, around health, around salutogenic models, etc., these are all really positive frames. But in the positive framing, industry will find a way to clarify it and say, yes, and we do that too. So, for example, I'm listening to Philip and talking about mental health. I know so many multinationals and so many transnational organisations here that have so many programs on kind of mental health programs for their employees. And at the same time, they will do this, and at the same time will fight tooth and nail to not increase the minimum wage. So we can see that these actors are Janus faced. They give with one hand and they take with another. And when we understand that bigger picture and are more clear-eyed about that picture, we are able to change the starting point and focus on the commercial reasons why we are in the situation that we are in. Thank you.